Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let us pause for the invocation to be followed by the singing of the Philippine national anthem and the Blue Night song.
Recording in progress.
O one God of all nations, you created the earth and the cosmos in their differences, beauty, and frailty. The various cultures and religions seek you, the origin of all things. You want each to be for all, not a threat, but a blessing. Lead us to where it is truly you who reign over us, with your love and your compassion. We come to you because you are our God, moving in our hearts in the geniuses of our different religions. You are our Father. You are our Allah. You are our Manama. Magbabaya, Diwata, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma. You call us to peace. God of all truth and goodness, bless us as we gather here at the Ateneo de Davao University. May we be strengthened in mind and heart to pursue what you inspire with insight and deliberation, that our world may advance in true wisdom and justice for all. Amen.
As we wind down to the last week of the semester, we bring you another topic for our Pakighinabi conversation series this afternoon, zooming in on the latest controversy of one of social media's giants, Facebook. This event is jointly facilitated by the Department of Information Technology and the Department of Languages, Literature, and Arts. A blessed Monday afternoon to all our participants who are in the Zoom platform. Father Joel Itabora of the Society of Jesus, members of the Jesuit community, administrators, faculty and non-teaching personnel, and students coming from the different units of the Ateneo community, the grade school, the junior high school, the senior high school, and the higher education units, and to our invited guests. We are also streaming live on YouTube via the ADU YouTube channel. Welcome to our Pakighinabi conversation with the topic, #Profit over People, confronting the deeper issues behind the Facebook expose, where we talk about the controversial revelation of a former Facebook employee, Frances Haugen, on Facebook and its jarring effects to society. So stay with us for an engaging afternoon with our lead discussant and our panel of reactors. To formally open our conversation this afternoon is the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Renante D. Pilapil. Let's give him a virtual round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Stella, Father Joel, Jesuit fathers, colleagues, guests, students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar on confronting the deeper issues behind the Facebook expose. As everyone probably knows, Facebook is now facing a major PR crisis after revelations of repeatedly prioritizing profit over public safety, thanks to the whistleblower Frances Haugen, a former Facebook product manager. Just last week, last Friday to be exact, a new whistleblower accused Facebook of knowingly hosting hate speech and illegal activity, while leaked internal documents revealed how the company failed to address concerns over US election misinformation. Well, these initial damning revelations about Facebook, as well as the consequent government investigations, are mainly taking place in the US, it is worth asking what the implications are of these issues in our own country. In the Philippines, as of 2020, there are nearly 76 million Facebook users, a huge jump from 67.89 million in 2019, partly due to the pandemic that led more people to use the internet. That's about 69% of our total population here in the Philippines. This huge number represents the number of Filipinos actively using or accessing the social media. In a recent report, the Filipinos spend 4 hours and 15 minutes each day on social media, topping the global usage ranking for the 6th straight year. We also topped global internet use at around 11 hours per day. So you see, given this data, the recent Facebook expose is indeed very concerning for us in the Philippines, especially now that we will have our own elections next year. We all know that even in our own context, Facebook and other social media platforms have been used in order to spread fake news, lies, confusion, and doubts about facts and truth instigated by various groups and entities. And yet Facebook and other social media platforms remains unregulated, even addicting to some people, to young people specifically, badly affecting their mental health. I will not go into the deeper issues here, as this is precisely what our resource person will share with us today. I just hope that our activity today will be fruitful and meaningful for all of us. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pilapil. There's definitely much to be said about the issues that have a direct impact on all of us, considering how much of our social experiences, especially during this pandemic, we are sharing in social networking sites such as Facebook. To introduce our lead discussant this afternoon, may I call on a faculty of the Computer Science Department and a member of the Jesuit community, Father Ramon Prudencio S. Toledo of the Society of Jesus. Let us welcome him with a round of applause.
Our lead discussant is more famously known these days as the assistant to the academic vice president for online education and the face of Moodle, our university's online learning platform. But he wears many hats. For those in the social sciences, he is a full-time faculty researcher at Ateneo the Davao University's Department of Anthropology, a role for which he was formally prepared through the Master of Anthropology advanced degree that he obtained with commendation from the Australian National University. His scholarly interests include the study of various Lumad cultures in Mindanao and issues arising from the widespread use of social media. For the former, he does fieldwork. For the latter, network analysis. He can tease out the originators and spreaders of tweets, ranging from entertainment gossip, campus politics, to political discourse. Thanks no doubt to his work on his master's thesis entitled Posthumous Agency on Facebook. For those whose interests are in philosophy and theology, his reflections and insights flow out of a Bachelor of Sacred Theology degree that he concluded as a magna cum laude graduate at Loyola School of Theology. He cut his information technology thesis at Ateneo de Manila University through a Bachelor of Science in Management Information Systems degree. He has taught philosophy, theology, literature, and computer science at the Jesuit Universities of Xavier Ateneo de Cagayan, Ateneo de Zamboanga, Ateneo de Manila, and at the Redemptorist-directed St. Alfonso's Theological Mission Institute. Once upon a time, he was the director and principal of Father Leone Memorial School. As is typical of many Jesuits, he has also served outside the school setting. He was Dean of the Cabanglasan Deanery of the Diocese of Malaybalay when he was the parish priest of Señora de Guadalupe Parish in Cabanglasan, Bukidnon. He was once a chaplain of the Philippine General Hospital. For many of our students, faculty, and staff, he is one of the coolest Jesuits on campus, the clear, incisive, and concise thinker, the mass celebrant who comes up with initially jaw-dropping but entirely sensible catchphrases in memorable homilies, the eminently quotable Jesuit. I'll now present to you our lead discussant, Father Ulysses Oji S. Caballo of the Society of Jesus.
Thank you very much for the very generous introduction, Father Denny. First of all, I'd like to say good afternoon to everyone. And I'd like to recognize, of course, our university president, Father Joel, our deans, the members of the administrators and the faculty, as well as the students coming from the different units. Also, I'd like to recognize our reactors, Director Asum and Engineer Cabonlong, and as well as Ms. Gwyneth Vasquez. So before I start, I just would like to ask if my slides are visible on screen.
Yes, Father, they are visible.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I begin my talk by first showing you a series of headlines that were published by the Wall Street Journal. This is where this entire issue is coming from, at least based on the media mileage that it has acquired this past weeks. While it actually blew with the revelations of the Facebook whistleblower, Frances Haugen, it actually began with a series of articles that were published by the Wall Street Journal. Here are some screenshots of the articles. As of today, the Wall Street Journal has published around 11 articles, which they dubbed as the Facebook files. So in it, many of the issues that Frances Haugen talks about are being outlined and discussed, mostly relying on the documents, the internal documents that Frances Haugen shared with the Wall Street Journal. I have here a simple timeline of events, beginning with the first article that was published in September 13, 2021. And then it was one article after another has been published by the WSJ. But these articles, of course, did not go unnoticed. In fact, if you take a look at the Facebook press site, you would see that Facebook, in between these articles, have also published, in a sense, responses to the accusations that were being made by the Wall Street Journal. As you can see here, in September 16, for example, they published something about removing new types of harmful networks, which was really a response to the third Facebook file that was published by the Wall Street Journal. Another one, of course, here's a more pointed reply, what the Wall Street Journal got wrong. And then they were talking about content distribution guidelines. And they've also responded in September 26 to that much discussed article about how Instagram harms the self-esteem and well-being of teenage girls. But all of that came to became a really big issue when the one who leaked these documents to the Wall Street Journal came out in public. And she was identified as Frances Haugen. And basically, she came out with a bang, appearing in a 60-minute, the show 60 Minutes, where she basically recounted her experience as a former employee of Facebook and how she felt very disturbed by what research has presented, and at the same time, the management's response to this very interesting researches. You might also recall at some point, and I think we were all affected by this, I place this there not to insinuate that this had something to do with the issue, but to show you how this is an issue that affects not only a certain group of people in the United States, but that it is an issue that affects us globally. You might remember late afternoon, or I guess late evening of early evening of October 4, there was a Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp outage. What was surprising about this was people were tweeting about this outage, about this blackout by going into Twitter, and basically that caused a spike in the rise of Twitter users during that time. After this outage, you have, of course, the formal Haugen testifying before the U.S. Senate, where she also in greater detail outlined many of the things that she has already mentioned in that 60 Minutes interview. If you've been following closely also the events, Mark Zuckerberg posted something on his Facebook page responding to the allegations for that have emerged those past days. But of course, it did not stop there. If you examine, again, Facebook's press releases, they have been constantly coming out with articles in response to accusations of privacy breaches, and so on and so forth. And of course, the Wall Street Journal has not stopped publishing articles now. The latest one being released last October 21. But this is not the entire thing. Of course, you've also heard that there was another whistleblower that came out and basically reiterating the accusations that Frances Haugen brought about. Okay. So having said that, I guess we just have to take a look at Frances Haugen. There are many things, many issues that she has raised, mainly in terms of the platform, also in terms of practices, management practices on Facebook, and basically how Facebook was responsible for some of the harmful effects, both in terms of mental well-being as well as political movements. So I'd like to sum up all these accusations by taking a look and quoting from Mark Zuckerberg's response. And this response is actually something that Frances Haugen was actually saying, not only in her 60 Minutes interview, but also in when she testified before the US Senate. So Zuckerberg basically said that at the heart of these accusations is the idea that Facebook prioritizes profit over safety and well-being. So the question now here is this true? Is there is there some truth to the accusation that Facebook is really prioritizing profit over safety and well-being, or is Mark Zuckerberg just a misunderstood guy? What I'd like to do to unpack the issues that pertain to this expose is I'll be following three trajectories. First, I would like to suggest that to be able to understand the deeper issues, we must first pursue three paths. First, we must take a look at examine Facebook as an app, and then we examine Facebook as a platform, and then we examine Facebook as a business model. I think the question that we have to ask ourselves right now is, what does Facebook mean to you at this point? For the early adopters, Facebook was just in the late 2000s. It was a novelty. I remember getting into Facebook because I had met a group of French students who apparently were not in Friendster or were not in Multiply, but who were on Facebook. So to link up with them, I had to sign up for a Facebook account sometime, 2007, I think, or 2006, just so I could, communicate. So they were my earliest Facebook friends. Since that time, I already have created 5 Facebook accounts, deactivated 4 of them, and created the last one when I got assigned to Ateneo de Davao, and decided that, especially during the time of the pandemic, there was no other way to, maintain my social links except by maintaining a Facebook account. So for many of us, I guess those who have witnessed Facebook in its early days, Facebook has really evolved from just being a social networking site. It wasn't. Back then, it was just a place to reconnect connect with new friends and reconnect with old friends. But some point you might remember, Facebook has become parang our gaming platform. Those of us who have been addicted to Farmville or to many of those games on Facebook would still remember. But I'm sure it's a different experience now. Suddenly, Facebook became a place to watch videos. Facebook became a place to trade goods. You remember the barter. Davao barter, which emerged during the early days of the pandemic, and so on and so forth. So in other words, Facebook, for many of us, is not a social networking site anymore, but for some, it may be our experience of the internet. So it really has gone beyond what it originally was intended to do. And I think this is one thing that makes it very difficult to analyze Facebook. because before parang it was clear what it was about, but now it has meant so many things to so many people. And that is why I said I would suggest that perhaps a good way to start analyzing Facebook and the issues that are coming up is to consider three of the many characterizations of Facebook. Okay, so let me start off by looking at Facebook as an app. So the question, I guess, that we have here is, what is an app? Maybe this isn't really a question that some of you are asking anymore, but just for purposes of clarification, we would like to define what an app is. So an app is actually a contraction of the term application, which means, as you can see there, it's an item of software that anyone with a suitable platform can install without the need for technical expertise. So what an app does is it makes things easier for you. But not only that, but an app allows you to carry, an app is a software that's designed to carry out a specific task. In this case, for example, looking at Facebook as an app, it's not only meant to help you reconnect with people, but it's also meant to help you, enjoy or find time to enjoy on this platform. Now, it allows you to store your photos, to live stream videos, to sell something, talking about live selling, and so on and so forth. So as an application, Facebook now has a lot of tasks that it can actually accomplish compared to, for example, an application such as Microsoft Word, which allows you to write and so on and so forth. Now, but as you said, Facebook has come to mean many things to many people because as an app, it's not only designed to carry out a single task, but it's meant to carry out a lot of tasks. Okay. But how different is Facebook as an app? And how different is it compared to the other things that we use? Because if you look at some of the press releases from Facebook, they would just argue that Facebook is just a thing similar to other things that people use in order to reconnect, in order to form community and so on and so forth. In fact, at this point, I will be sharing with you a video. I'm not sure if many of you have seen this video, but the video is entitled Shares. And it was a video that was released by Facebook emphasizing what Facebook was all about, at least according to their perspective. Let me just show you this video. I'm sorry.
Chairs. Chairs are made so that people can sit down and take a break. Anyone can sit on a chair, and if the chair is large enough, they can sit down together and tell jokes, or make up stories, or just listen. Chairs are for people, and that is why chairs are like Facebook. Doorbells, airplanes, bridges. These are things people use to get together, so they can open up and connect about ideas and music and other things that people share. Dance floors, basketball, a great nation. A great nation is something where they can have a place where they belong. The universe. It is vast and dark and makes us wonder if we are alone. So maybe the reason we make all of these things is to remind ourselves that we are not.
Okay. I think what Facebook wants us to think is that Facebook is just a simple thing. In fact, in effect, it's like telling others, why are you making such a big fuss about Facebook when Facebook is just like a chair, no? It's designed to fulfill a purpose, and in this case, the purpose is Facebook. It's just to help connect people and make the world a safer, more beautiful place to live in. No? That's what Facebook wants us to think. No? But then again, looking at what Facebook says in terms of what it does, no, I think we have to go back to understanding what Facebook was originally created for. And in this case, Facebook was really meant to connect friends. No, but the question I think that we have to ask here is friendship on Facebook the same as friendship when you're not on Facebook? I would like to argue here that the friendship or the connections that we make on Facebook is not the same as the connections that we make online, because there are other factors that come into play, especially in terms of how we enact and carry out our friendships on Facebook. Okay, and this factor that I'd like to highlight, at least in terms of looking at Facebook as an app, are what we call as algorithms. No? So at the outset, let me say that for this part, I will be arguing that for Facebook, okay, the algorithms of Facebook are not neutral, and the algorithms of Facebook are not transparent. That is why when we ask the question, what does it mean to be friends on Facebook, you can't just say that it's just like what happens when you're forming friends offline. No? For starters, when you sign up for Facebook, okay, Facebook asks you to add your list of contacts or list of friends. Of course, when you start off, you don't really make friends that way. No? And sometimes even in your list of contacts, there are some people there that you're not actually friends with anymore. And yet Facebook suggests that you add them. No? Another thing, for example, no, we might think that Facebook is very innocent in terms of the posts that appear on our newsfeed, but again, that's not true at all. No, it uses a certain algorithm to determine what actually appears on your newsfeed. No, when you're talking about the friends that are visible on your network and the friends that are invisible in your network, again, the algorithms of Facebook have something to do with that. No. There are times when we begin to feel that, why am I just relating with these groups of people when I have actually more than 100 friends on Facebook? No? But I'm just seeing the posts of this, just a certain group of people. Or we might be surprised that somebody that we have not heard of for quite some time will suddenly appear on a newsfeed, and we suddenly realize, we're actually friends. But why is it that he's only appearing now on my newsfeed, so on and so forth? So, in other words, when we take a look at friendship as it happens in Facebook, these friendships are actually mediated by factors which are not human factors at all. In fact, when you look at how friendship practices are being enacted on Facebook, usually there are two key features on Facebook that allow you to make friends. No? Of course, there's the personal profile where you sort of take a look at people that you want to friend. And there's also the newsfeed wherein people would be appearing and you enact your friendship by liking, by commenting, by reposting or resharing, for example, things that other people would post. If you take a look at the goal of newsfeed, Facebook says that the goal of newsfeed is to show you the stories that matter most to you every time you visit Facebook. But the question here is, how does it know that these are the stories that matter to you? No? And how does it know when to deliver that content which you think is relevant and which you think, which Facebook thinks you'd be interested in? Of course, this is basically the whole idea behind algorithms. In other words, what we're saying here is that our friendships on Facebook, okay, are being affected by these algorithms, but these algorithms are not neutral because they privilege certain types of engagements, certain types of connections, and so on and so forth. Let me just backtrack a bit and just offer a definition for an algorithm. Many of the computer science students or scholars would refer to Knuth for a definition of what an algorithm is. But for social scientists, well, algorithms are defined as, are described as a recipe. They basically tell you, they tell this program, they offer a step-by-step guide in terms of how something is to be accomplished, provided that there are certain parameters to be able to do something in that program. In fact, one of the early algorithms of Facebook, which determined what appears on your back then your wall or your timeline, is the algorithm which they called as the edge rank formula. So this algorithm, which existed up to 2011, but is now practically not being used in Facebook anymore, determines it according to certain categories such as affinity, basically how connected you are to a particular user, weight, which refers to the interactions that you would have regarding a particular post, and of course decay, referring to the timeliness, or the recentness, for example, of a particular post. So all these factors taken together would determine what appears first in your post. So in other words, not all of your friends who post will actually appear on your feed, because there is an algorithm that determines what appears there. And therefore, while we might think that these are just occurring naturally, once again, we don't know it, but there's already the algorithm determines the people that would connect to you and the people that you would be connecting to. After 2011, Facebook, of course, revamped its algorithm. And many scholars have noted that, and this is something that Frances Haugen also mentioned, that outside of Facebook, nobody really knows the actual algorithm that determines how posts are being ranked or how posts appear on Facebook. But there was something in early January 2021. Facebook released this article basically showing how the algorithm works. But according to them, there are many factors involved, but this is just a simplified explanation of how the algorithm works. So looking at this, you see that when you talk about the inventory, Facebook takes all the posts available in your network, and then it scores them according to certain ranking signals, similar to what we mentioned about the edge rank algorithm. And then after that, it goes through several integrity processes wherein Facebook checks whether a content is fake or not, whether and so on and so forth. And after doing that, it discards basically content that you are most unlikely to engage with based on your past behavior in the network. And from there, after selecting the relevant post to you, it runs through another algorithm which personalizes the content that will eventually be shown to you. And then it does another pass, the algorithm does another pass where it picks a variety of posts that it shares to you. So usually it provides a certain mix of photos, videos, music, text, text-based content, and so on and so forth, to make that news feed interesting for you. So, as we can see here, these decisions are things which we often are not aware of, but they determine to a very big extent how we behave and how we socialize on Facebook. In fact, one scholar who was tackling this sociality in Facebook talks about the sociality that happens on Facebook as a program sociality. Okay, sorry, the definition there is I wasn't able to correct that definition there. But what it really means is that the way we socialize is being coded in certain ways to make us behave in certain ways. No? But then again, despite the fact that there is this thing called algorithms, as we said, these algorithms are not very transparent. Actually, people don't really know how they work. As a matter of fact, one way of understanding algorithms is to think of them as an algorithmic imaginary. So these are basically ways of thinking about the algorithm, how they're supposed to behave, how they're supposed to function, and what they're supposed to do. But this is a product actually of people making inferences about what the algorithm is supposed to do. Because, as we have said earlier, nobody actually knows outside of Facebook the real algorithm, the real score in terms of how these decisions are being made. In fact, in many researches, when we encounter algorithms, it generates certain situations. And one scholar by the name of Tina Butcher basically classifies our encounter with the algorithmic imaginary in terms of six experiences. Let me just highlight one experience here. One experience of the algorithmic imaginary is in terms of profiling identity. So what that means is usually, you've been browsing certain things. You're going through, for example, you're always taking a look at certain types of medicine or looking for certain vacation spots and so on and so forth. And what Facebook does is it tracks and profiles us and offers that content in our newsfeed. But sometimes there are occasions wherein we might be looking at those things, but not exactly in the way that Facebook interprets it to be. And therefore, I think the key point of this experience of the algorithm is that mali, parang that I don't actually like being reminded of it. I'm just looking at it because there's something that I want to know. But then Facebook just keeps on giving back that kind of content. So our experience of Facebook, therefore, is affected by this imaginary, and this experience, our encounter with the algorithm. While we have said earlier that algorithms determine the content that is being shown to us, but here, when we're talking about the algorithmic imaginary, what we do to it in terms of how we interpret it also shapes and reshapes the algorithms that are interacting with us. In fact, when you take a look at how people interact with these algorithms, again, a group of scholars made a typology of algorithm awareness, and depending on how aware or unaware you are, this generates certain attitudes that people have regarding the use of the algorithm. For example, for those who are very aware, for those who have very high awareness that an algorithm actually shapes how you interact on Facebook, mostly it results in an attitude that is very negative towards Facebook. But for those who are, slightly aware of an algorithm happening on Facebook, usually it creates a neutral to a more positive view of Facebook. So, what we're saying now is really, I guess, part of the problem that we're experiencing in terms of Facebook is the notion that when we're using Facebook, we're not using Facebook as if it is a neutral platform, no? But that it is a platform that is designed to generate engagement in a certain way. No? As a matter of fact, this is something that many have used in order to generate more engagement, more likes. No? One very controversial study was done by Kramer et al. In 2012 that talks about how social emotional contagion spreads to these social networks. And what they found out was that if you kept on posting negative content, these are the content that would generate more likes and more engagement as compared to positive content. No? So the other thing here is that, while some of us may have an idea of how these algorithms work, these algorithms are not very transparent. And because they're not very transparent, both because of a decision that Facebook makes and because we don't really see what's under the hood, many people are led to believe that, things are happening just naturally, when as a matter of fact, they're not. They're being determined by a set of instructions which privilege certain types of information and which lead us to consider things that are more likely to generate more attention and engagement on Facebook. Second point is looking at Facebook as a platform. We define a platform as in so many ways. Basically, a platform is something that allows us to do something in it. I guess a more simplified explanation of a platform comes from a scholar from the University of Amsterdam, Richard Rogers, says that platforms are online services that host and deliver user-created content. So what does this have to do with Facebook? When we take a look at Facebook, Facebook is not just an app, but it is a platform. It allows other things to happen in this platform. And what does it actually allow? It allows other apps to be built on it. So, for example, when you take a look at the family of apps that are present on Facebook, you have Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp, Oculus, Facebook Workplace, and so on and so forth. Many of these apps are possible because they are because of the platform that Facebook provides. But what makes this platform work? What allows it to function? No? What it does is it makes the experience. It provides for a multiplicity of experience for many users, and because it makes a multiplicity of experience for many users are also being hooked, to get into these platforms, and in doing so, make available any information about them through these platforms. You might remember, again, in the past, one example of apps that make Facebook as a platform would be Farmville. You might remember this thing happening when you first sign up for Farmville, no? And many of us, maybe, I remember I just click on play game. No, I did not read the details. But if you look closely at the details now, you will see that it says there, this app will receive your basic info, your email address, your birthday, your location, and many other things. No? But, when we were playing, parang that did not matter to us at all. What we were just interested in was just to play. No? And when we look at Facebook as a platform, we see that what Facebook does is it tries to cater to so many interests, to developers who would want to cater to so many interests, and in doing so, it tends to not store but hoard a lot of information about people. No? Now, the thing here is, platforms are useful because, for example, when you look at Facebook Live, such as what's happening, I guess now, no, the platform allows us to, reach a bigger audience. It allows videos such as this one to be downloaded later, and so on and so forth. In other words, you don't have to create all these other hardware requirements to be able to broadcast your video to the entire world, no? But Facebook already takes care of that for us, no? But the problem with this is that the data that Facebook gets, in other words, the data gathered from the personal information of people who use that platform, okay, are being used for something else, no? They're being used to generate capital, no? In other words, the thing about platforms is that platforms converts the sociality, the interactions that happen on Facebook. It converts it so that it becomes capital that can be appropriated and exploited for its value as data. No? In other words, as a platform, parang Facebook uses what we do, our likes, our engagements, our videos, and so on and so forth, to extract surplus value that creates basically its business. As you can see here is a sample a diagram of how Facebook makes its money. No? Simply put, what happens on Facebook is that I log on. Facebook gathers data on me and my preferences, what posts I like, what posts I comment to, what things I read, and so on and so forth. It stores that data and it allows other apps to access that data. But not only that, it not only allows other apps, but it allows businesses who would want to use that data to market their products to us. No? So maybe some of us have used Facebook ads before, no, or right now, no. When you want to boost a post, you will remember in the options for boosting a post, you have there a variety of options. You can determine which area you'd like your post boosted, what demographic, what age range, what preferences, what topics, and so on and so forth. But this is only possible only because in a platform, the data that it collects from individuals are being stored and therefore also marketed to other businesses so that they'd be able to make profit out of that information. Okay, so in other words, Facebook naman has not been mum about this. In fact, if you take a look at their terms of service, they actually indicate that what makes Facebook free is because of ads, no? Because of ads, but they don't explicitly say how this works, no? The ads happen. The ads appear in your newsfeed. They appear on your Facebook because your information has already been given and sold to the highest bidder. No? So what we're seeing, I guess, at this point is that it becomes difficult to think about people because as a platform, people, specifically the relationships that people have on Facebook, okay, become the source of income for these platforms. No? So, in other words, the more interactions that are happening on Facebook, the more time that you spend on Facebook, the greater the income that it could possibly generate for these platforms. No? So we might wonder, no, if you are going to curtail, for example, how these platforms operate, you're actually going to also curtail, supposedly, the revenue that is being generated through these platforms. No? So The other thing that we could ask about when we're taking a look at platforms is to consider to pose certain questions to the platforms that we are using, no? And it means understanding, for example, how is value being created in this platform? Who is capturing the value that is produced in this platform? And who is owning or really controlling it? No? I won't go into the details of this, but these are questions that we could perhaps consider when looking at Facebook at the platform. No? As we said, to the first question, what value is actually created? No? I think I would suggest here that the value that is being created, as I said, is actually the interactions, the friends, and the interactions, the engagement that happens on Facebook. No? It is being created as value by converting it into data, no? Which is now being owned and being marketed to other people who would want to make use of that data. No? So in other words, who could afford this data? Who could afford this information? Well, I guess people who have the means to afford it will be able to use this capital to generate more capital for themselves. But in the end, parang it leaves you as the user, exploited without you actually knowing that you've been exploited already. Only because parang we are merely using the platform, no? And this platform delivers it for free, but it makes us think that we are using it for free. But what is actually happening is that this thing that we enact and do on Facebook is what generates the business for Facebook. Which leads us to, I've already said this, and another point here about looking at Facebook as a platform. Platforms therefore become a mode of extraction, no? To gather life, no? Because Mark Zuckerberg always talks about how Facebook is a reflection of our lives. No? But this extraction happens in many ways because platforms allow us to, for example, track parang our exercise habits, parang our viewing habits, and so on. In other words, platforms attempt to gather as much about our lives as possible. But as it gathers it, then it becomes the new relations that is being converted as a surplus value. No? So following Marx before, parang when you think of the laborer working, the surface value is what gives the capitalist profit. Now here, the surplus value is just you being on Facebook. No? You watching a video, you reading a post, you uploading a photo, you playing a game, and so on and so forth. Without you knowing it, you're creating that value that makes Facebook richer. Last one. So quickly, Facebook as a business model. If you take a look at Facebook's site, they state clearly that their mission is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. Sounds like a very lofty and ideal mission. But then again, what makes that possible is something that could be considered as something that's very insidious. No? And the way perhaps to make sense of that is taking a look at the concept which we call data colonialism, which basically states that the new social relations which happen on Facebook, which now become data relations, they become a key means whereby new forms of economic value are created. So what we're saying here is the moment a platform such as Facebook gathers information about us, it extracts that information for us, keeps it for itself, and uses it to enrich itself, leaving you, supposedly offering you a certain premium by giving you a chance to connect to friends, to watch videos, and so on and so forth. But if that were the case, then Facebook would not become the, one of, if not the biggest, one of the biggest companies in the world right now. No, it's still earning a lot, especially in this time of the pandemic. No, and when you think about it, if it is to control parang how interactions happen on Facebook, that would mean taking a hit in terms of the revenues that are coming in. But it is to Facebook's interest that it maintains that kind of model. No, it just keeps on giving you the content that you think you'd like. It tends to suggest things that you might be interested in, because the longer you stay on it, the more capital that it generates for this platform. And that is the whole business model of Facebook. And what it does is it makes us think that this collection of data, when it asks for our information, for our phone number, for our email address, what it does, is it tends to naturalize this whole process of capturing data from human subjects. Makes us think that it's okay. It's a fair trade. I give this, but in return, parang I'm able to access the platform. But then again, once we are in the platform, it develops certain modes of extraction, which I have already talked about earlier. And slowly, the more addicted and the more that Facebook becomes part of our life, the more it captures more and more data, more and more about our life, which is converted into data for the use of other businesses and for basically propping up its own business. So going back again to that model, this is how this model will begin to make sense to us. If we look closely at its terms of service, let me just point out to you something here. It says, we don't charge you to use Facebook. Instead, businesses and organizations pay us to show you ads for their products and services. But what they don't indicate here is, it's as if somebody is paying for your enjoyment of these services. But the truth of the matter is that you are actually paying for these services, because your data is the capital that these businesses buy. So in a sense, Facebook gathers profit from your being on Facebook alone, but it also gains even greater profit because other people will be buying that data from them. Another thing here, parang you could check this out in the Facebook website. So Facebook also tells, supposedly in a transparent manner, the kinds of information that it collects. But I just took a screenshot of one of the many things that it actually collects. It says there, things you and others do and provide. But if you look closely at what's happening, these are not the only things that it collects. There are many things. And maybe this is an invitation for you to look it up so that you actually know what you're getting into. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is that, contrary to the discourse that tells you that, Facebook offers you a service that you're enjoying for free. Contrary to that discourse, what you're actually doing when you're using Facebook is that it's not free, because your data specifically is the one that is being used to build Facebook even more. In other words, you're paying for it by the mere fact that you are on it, and you are in it, and that you are using it. But the thing here, I guess, that we would like to take a look into is, as a business model, I think we have to challenge the notion of how Facebook and other platforms naturalize the collection of data from human beings. Often disguising the commercial interest that underlies these forms of extraction. And I think this is one thing that we would want to bring up, no? Because yun nga, at the end of it all, parang we're saying that Facebook is still a business. It's not there to just help people connect with each other. It's there because it is a business, no? And knowing that, I guess parang lends credence to the fact that Facebook is indeed prioritizing profits over people, no? And that I think is the deeper issue that we need to confront. That as I've argued, no, that what causes all these problems is because of this system that converts our sociality into a capital that could be appropriated and exploited by others, no? Thereby leaving us dispossessed, no, and leaving them parang enriched and generating more capital for themselves. So in the end, I guess this is the main point that I'd like to share through this exposition. So with that, I think I went beyond time. I end with that presentation.
Thank you very much, Father Caballo. Certainly, there were stimulating, disconcerting, and downright scary ideas that had been raised by unpacking and uncovering issues embedded in Facebook as an app, as a platform, and as a business model. So with that, I'd like to encourage everyone to give Father Oji another round of applause for sharing his thoughts about the issues surrounding Facebook. We have also invited a panel of reactors who certainly have many important insights about this recent Facebook expose. Our first reactor is an anthropology student, the 2020-2021 editor-in-chief of Ateneo, ADU's official student publication, and founder and president of the Mindanao Anthropological Society of Ateneo, or MASA, an advocacy-based academic organization of anthropology students. She was recently selected as one of the 35 young leaders to represent the Philippines in the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation's Next Gen Leadership Program. She is Miss Gwyneth Vasquez. Our second reactor has served as one of the representatives of the Philippines in ICT international conferences in Brunei, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, among others. He has served as regional director of the then Telecommunications Office for 17 years. Currently, he is the regional director of the Department of Information and Communications Technology for Region 11, Region 12, and Mainland BARM, Director Alimbzar Asum. And our third and final reactor this afternoon has authored and implemented the Philippine National Cybersecurity Plan 2022 and the Philippine Cybersecurity Management System Project of the National Cybersecurity Operations Center. He was former executive director of the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordinating Center, the former assistant secretary in charge of International Cooperation Division, and former assistant secretary for cybersecurity and enabling technologies of DICT. He is currently a highly technical consultant to the Office of the Secretary of the Department of Information and Communications Technology. ASEAN engineer Alan Cabanlong. Now let's give the virtual floor and a round of applause to our first reactor, Ms. Gwyneth Vasquez.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Arsenas. And of course, thank you, Father Oji, for the very insightful and I think thought-provoking discussion this afternoon. I think at the end of the discussion, what I really got are more what I have are more questions than answers, no, because of the really should I say the issues that at first glance would have been taken for granted, not only by people who are constantly on the internet or on Facebook, but also those who use Facebook only every once in a while. Definitely, it reminds me of this quote from The Social Dilemma, this movie on Netflix, who said that if you're not paying for the product, then that means you're basically the product. And I think that also encapsulates Father Audrey's presentation this afternoon, because we see how, although Facebook gives us so many benefits and advantages, it kind of shrinks distance for people. It kind of brings about a global community where the barriers of distance and space and even time kind of collapse. At the end of the day, we're paying a price for it, and there's a cost. It's never free. I'd like to raise siguro 3 points now based on what I got from Father Audrey's discussion, and also relating it to my own experience as an anthropology student and also as a student journalist who's been in social media as well, no, very often. So first is in terms of the dilemma that people, especially I think young people in this day and age, face when it comes to Facebook. Because on the one hand, we may know that it's harmful. I don't think we have to look at studies anyway, or we have to really delve into so much just to be able to determine that it causes certain problems for us. Because on one hand, it can cause some personal problems, it can cause insecurity for some people, and it can also bring about some issues to our mental health, sabi pa nga nila. But although we know it's harmful, it also enables a lot of things for us. For example, in Ateneo, in my work last year as the AIC, the time that we shifted totally to online, Facebook enabled a lot of things for us. Like, for example, we could no longer print our tabloids and our art folios, literary folios physically, and we could distribute it to the students because we were all dispersed all across Mindanao or the country. So Facebook provided that platform where we could still engage and connect with our audience, give them a sense that we were still here, we were still delivering news, we still kind of cared about this, our roles, our responsibilities as student journalists. And on the other hand, I also think that, especially for the so-called digital natives, like students or kids, individuals who grew up holding a gadget or being able to navigate the internet effortlessly, it has brought about a world where they could not only socialize but also develop and shape their own identity. A lot of anthropological studies touch into this, no, not just in terms of how it shapes identity, but also how it could participating in Facebook discussions, for example, or participating in groups could be a mode of resistance. How you could use it to contest certain expectations or stereotypes about your identity. And all of that basically boils down to how Facebook, through its modes of sociality, its affordances, have given people a space to find their own place in the world, especially if that place is kind of unstable in the real life. So they go to social media, they go to Facebook to find that for themselves. So if it's harmful on one hand, but also it enables a lot of things for us, then how do we live that tension? Because definitely at this point in time, you can't just tell people that because Facebook is harmful, then stop using it, or don't delete your account, deactivate your account. That would be unimaginable for some people at this point. And I think knowing all these issues, the deeper issues, or confronting them would also entail living that tension between the advantages that it offers for us, but also the harms, and ultimately the way that Facebook exploits us and our data. Second point is in terms of what Father Oji said, in terms of how algorithms are not neutral and transparent. It really caught my attention how he said that these algorithms or Facebook privileges certain types of engagement over others, no? Because in my own research, it's quite related to ICTs and Facebook as well, because I touched upon the digital divide in Mindanao, for example, and in terms of ICT for development, or information and communication technology for development. I also encountered some readings not related to Facebook, but this time it's Google, and it's also a multinational company that's really huge and that really covers and gathers a lot of data, or offers us a lot of data too. I found out that one of these famous scholars in the literature named Elad Segev wrote this book titled Google and the Digital Divide, and the main argument, his main argument in the book was that Google, or the search engine as such as Google, basically reinforces the digital divide, because although at first you would think that it's a great equalizer, it offers free information to people of different backgrounds. Much of the information that can be found in Google is actually dominated by Western or sources or companies that originate or are located in the West, in the global North, for example, or by countries by developed countries, those who most likely are also exploiting lesser developed countries. And I think based on what I learned from that book, and also what I heard from Father Oji, maybe it gives us a greater and a deeper insight as to not just Facebook and Google, but social media and all these other websites as a whole. At the end of the day, we have to look at their business model on one hand, and also where it's all really coming from, because we might be able to conclude at the end of the day that maybe it's all really just capitalism coming into play, and then exploiting those who have the lesser capacity to have control over their own data, or over their own lives. And that also raises the question, I think, if algorithms are not neutral and not transparent, and if our sociality on Facebook is quote unquote programmed, then does that mean that there is no space, or is there still a space for human agency on Facebook if much of it is mediated by these algorithms? I mean, definitely, we think we have the choice to add this guy or not, or to join this group or not. But as Father Oji said, it's really programmed. It's mediated by the sets of instructions that govern Facebook. So when we think that we have control over what we do on Facebook, is that really the case? Or is it really all just being controlled by someone more powerful than us? And finally, my third point is in terms of algorithm awareness. I particularly like the part where Father Oji mentioned the different the spectrum of algorithm awareness. It was very catchy for me, because it really captured how people are not just aware or not aware of these algorithms, but that there are degrees of awareness. And I think in terms of yung pinaka-last, nasa pinaka-right, where people tend to be critical or are ultra aware of these algorithms, can also go both ends. People who are aware of the algorithm can use it to be critical about what they're seeing and what they're reading on Facebook. Like, for example, if I'm aware of the algorithm and I see an ad of something that I like, then I wouldn't automatically purchase it because I know that it's a targeted ad. But also, people who have more sinister ends could actually use that to forward their own agenda. Like, for example, this very recent issue of about involving Rappler, where they took down one of their posts, if you've encountered it, where they started a poll on your preferred presidential, and then they found out that they took it down a few days later or a few hours later because they found out that most of those who voted in their poll were troll accounts. They were they think that it wasn't a fair game anymore because all this certain party was using troll accounts to raise the number of votes. So I think that's an example of how people with sinister ends could actually also use their awareness of the algorithm to forward their own agenda. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that really you're aware of the algorithm that you could automatically do that to do good things, because being aware of the algorithm could also mean using it for fake news, using it for historical revisionism, like what we're seeing right now. And I think at the end of it all, we have to also we have to not only criticize people, no, when we look at their posts, kunyari, about historical revisionism or fake news, but we have to confront the deeper issues about these algorithms, and also kind of not just advocate, but really pressure Facebook to reveal these algorithms if because we know that it's really it's causing, or it's causing certain negative consequences to a lot of people. And I think at the end of it, we're all called to be critical about these platforms that we're using, and not just critical in terms of our own use, but also to urge other people to be critical alongside ourselves, so that in the upcoming elections, for example, we could all arrive at healthier discourses and also engagements that really matter, and in order to combat fake news and all these other circumstances, no, that are brought about by algorithms that are not transparent to us and are not neutral at the end of the day. So that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vasquez, for sharing your profound thoughts. And I think we are left with more questions than answers. Now let's give our attention to the reactor, our second reactor, Director Alimzar Asum. A virtual round of applause, please.
Is my audio all right?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon. Mayong hapon sa atuang mga kauban diri o sa tanan natong viewers sa YouTube. Assalamualaikum. Di pakighinabi on confronting the deeper issues behind the Facebook expose. As been elaborated by our speaker, Father Ramon Prudencio S. Toledo, SG. I've learned so much thing about it, especially on algorithm. You see, even at this time, I even wonder that why of all the names for this platform or apps, they name it as Facebook. But just the same, if you look at the very purpose why Facebook was created, then it would seem that this is a great help to the society, considering that it could connect us with friends, relatives, and other people we know. And it is easy to share photos and videos and send messages and get updates. Although this time you realize that there are more downs than ups, considering that Facebook is used, overused, or even abused. And in fact, um, we are deviating from the very purpose of having, using the Facebook, because some sectors are even weaponizing it to destroy certain group of people, especially the politicians. This Facebook is even used by some terrorist groups to influence others, and of course, this also serve as a venue for scammers. That's why this is a very, very, very good opportunity that we are having this kind of pakikihinabi, considering that you see, we now we are now living in two worlds. This is the real world and the internet world, where especially in the time of pandemic, we do a lot of things in the internet world that we used to do in the real world. So that this internet world should be regulated, and now we have to provide some guidelines, or even promulgate laws that could govern us like we are being governed in the real world, so that people should be aware that if they would learn to be very careful and very mindful of what they do in the real world, they should know also on how to act in the internet world. Now, another thing after the expose is that we realize that there is now a debate on how Facebook deal with their consumers, if that is the right term, or their clients, considering that, as you see, they have to balance rather between social responsibility and profit, because as said by Father Caballo, I would say, Father Ulysses Caballo, that these things are even overused, or even abused, so that to the extent that Facebook forgot their responsibility on the users. I mentioned about weaponizing this platform, so that for the users, without knowing, this would also serve as an opium, because a lot of people are addicted to it, and then it could also mean as a poison, because as discussed by our speakers, and by Ms. Vasquez, that you see people are being manipulated to the extent that without knowing it, their mind are so much poisoned. And I would even call this Facebook as a disease, because as mentioned, a lot of our people, especially the the young ones, the teenagers, they contract some sort of illness or diseases connected with using Facebook. So other than weaponizing it, we also understand that Facebook are really monetizing this. In fact, as discussed earlier, we don't only spend by just being logging into Facebook. Facebook, of course, you're spending money because you have to be online, and of course, you have to pay for the connectivity. So, but just the same, despite of all this, if you look at the brighter or the good side of it, Facebook is a very good invention. It is an invention that help the people and even improve the living condition of mankind. But what is wrong about it is that a company like Facebook, they have to have conscience so that they would balance between the harm they've done to the consumers or the their clients, rather than on concentrating on the profit. I understand that the challenge Facebook faces in taking responsibility for its content is no simple task. So that, as discussed, algorithm. What I understand that there is no algorithm that would indict or rather to flag contents. Because this is an American company, maybe they could plug contents when the words or the information that is being posted on Facebook could be readily flagged by algorithm in place. But what about other languages? Like Filipino or even the local dialect, like in myself, Maranao. If I do it in Maranao way, there's no way for the algorithm to detect if I am, posting some things that could incite to rebellion, violence, or the things that I said in my own vernacular is hateful or tantamount to racism. So these are the challenges that Facebook is facing. Now, that's why the UN, considering that Facebook, as I said earlier, which is worldwide, no boundaries, so that this has to be regulated in a way that the UN should intervene on how to manage companies like this, because we cannot, we cannot make one company to decide with what people has to do or speak, no matter how powerful you are. If Facebook maybe doesn't like you, they could, deactivate your account, or the list they could take down what you say. So first, Facebook perhaps has to impose regulations, and the second one is there has to be state imposed regulations, and since Facebook has no boundaries, then perhaps the the international body or bodies or the UN could formulate policies or even laws on how to regulate companies wherever they are based, like in US or wherever they are on this planet. So I could recall that the UN chief called for global rules to regulate powerful social media companies like Facebook and Twitter. So with this observation, I hope I contributed to some because we understand that nowadays, while there are existing rules, laws that regulate people actions in the real world, there are no enough cyber laws such as cyber libel that could regulate social media, and of course it follows with the strict enforcement of the laws in the cyber world. So with that, thank you very much for inviting me as one of the reactors. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Director Asum, for sharing with us your thoughts and significant points regarding the issues surrounding Facebook. Let's give him a round of virtual applause. To our third and final reactor, let us give a warm welcome for ASEAN engineer Alan Cabanyan.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. And thank you, Father Caballo, for that wonderful presentation. It really gave the audience different perspectives about the use of Facebook in the Philippines. You know, Facebook users in the Philippines in September 2021, it accounts to 95,700,000 users of Facebook, according to NapoleonCat.com. And 31% of this is from age 18 to 24. So with that, really, the Philippines is one of the major users of Facebook. 53.4% are women and 46.6% are men. So mas marami pong babae na gumagamit ng Facebook. But the point here is the data is the oil of the industry. You know, the data has been used by the social media, the Facebook, as their oil, so that they can get more funds. They can get more profit. You know, because we are the product. Sabi nga ng isang ating the first reactor, if the product is free, then you are the product. You know, that's the problem. You know? The issues there is not with Facebook. The issues there is with the users. If the users will stop using Facebook, then there's no more product. Okay, but Facebook started as photo sharing, building friends, building communities of groups of friends. You know, some some got married using social media on Facebook. Facebook has negative effects on some people and positive effects on some people. So FB as a platform for using, I mean for the users that has good intentions, well, it is good for them. So it depends on how the user will use Facebook. So basically, the based on my experience in cybersecurity, social media is very hard to regulate. But there are countries that ban Facebook, like for example, China, Iran, Syria, and North Korea. They ban Facebook. The government banned Facebook, the access to Facebook, and they have their own political reasons and stability reasons because Facebook was used to conduct, social instability in their countries. So, who among of you here reads EULA or the terms of service when you sign on Facebook? When Father Caballo showed the terms of service on Facebook, it showed there that the data can be used, right? Your data can be used for ads, okay? But nobody reads the terms of service on Facebook because all they want is to put their profile pictures, send their photos, and talk to their friends abroad, talk to their girlfriends, their boyfriends. So these are the things that we need to educate the users of social media. So during those times when I was with the department, we conducted various cybersecurity awareness and education program. Actually, we started in Ateneo de Davao in Region 11 when we conducted the social campaign against the bad use of social media and how to combat it. So for me, in my own opinion, Facebook can be regulated if there's a violation. If Facebook violates the laws of the land, just like other countries are doing. However, it depends on our political status. It depends on the political will of our lawmakers. If we do that. However, Facebook has its own community standards. For example, if you are a user of Facebook, then you have to abide with the community standards defined by Facebook. Otherwise, your account will be shut down. So, like for example, violence and criminal behavior, safety, the objectionable content, integrity, authenticity, and etc. So these are some of the things that you need to abide with with community standards of Facebook, because I believe Facebook has its own content reviewers. When you post something that it's against the community standards, then your account will be shut down. For example, during the war in Marawi, there were posts of ISIS, so it was taken down. But it should be reported by sectors of government. So when we did that, we were able to communicate with Facebook and have taken down all those sites that promotes terrorism, even the sites that promote sexual abuse. So those were reported to Facebook. Actually, the DICT has a direct line to Facebook as regards to reporting mechanism. So bottom line is Facebook is already there. We know that there are exposés against Facebook, and we applaud Frances, for really saying out loud. However, the challenge now is how do we convince the 95.7 million users of Facebook to take down their accounts? Right? So that's the question. Okay. Well, as regards to algorithm of Facebook, that's their business model. We know that that's their bread and butter to earn profit, and the government can or if they understand what to do, they can question that, and they can also craft or policy that will engage government and Facebook if, for example, if the accounts or if that Facebook really will violates the laws of the land. So I think that's the thing that the government can do. However, as of this moment, there is no law that that tackles the use of any social media, for that matter, or regulating any social medias. Because I am Alan Cabalong. I can sign up with a different name, and I can use that as an avatar, to demean other users of Facebook online. So Facebook as an electoral tool. We are now in the election period. We know that the politicians are using Facebook as the platform for campaign since this pandemic. Just imagine, 95.7 million are Facebook users, and this is a very good platform for politicians to engage with. They can just, with a click of a button, they can cascade their policies. They can cascade their dreams of how the Philippines can be after 2022. So the social media platform, Twitter, Facebook, they have been used already by the politicians. Even now, the surveys, the politicians are using this platform, the Facebook platform, as a perception tool for them. They even made this dramatic moment using Facebook to really entice or give a great perception to the voters that they are in the number one spot. But if you drill down to the likes and the loves, it's all avatars. There are tools that can create avatars. We know that. There are tools that can create fake accounts, but there are also tools that can detect fake accounts. And I believe if that account violates Facebook's community standards, then it will be taken out. Anyways, my point here is regulating Facebook in the country is not yet there. We are not yet there. I think with this expose, I believe we can go back to the drawing table. The government can do that. They can go back to the drawing table with this seminar that we are having now. I believe we can create we can suggest some actions the government can do, the legislators can do, so that this can be addressed. Alam naman natin na maraming nangyayari sa Facebook that we cannot control. So that's why digital parenting programs, cybersecurity awareness programs are being conducted by the government, by the DICT, so that we can really prevent any bad things that can happen on Facebook. Anyways, there's so many to discuss, but the time is so little. I believe I have given some of my inputs and reaction to what Father Cabayan said. So good night and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Engineer Cabanlong, for your thought-provoking and interesting viewpoint. At this point, I'm sure many of you are eager to ask your questions or share your insights or comments about this very interesting discussion. However, in the interest of time, please send your questions via the chat box. and indicate to whom your question is addressed. So we only have a few minutes to tackle some questions. And while we do that, we have a link that will be posted in the chat box for the attendants for you to be able to receive your certificate of participation. So now we open the virtual space for the open forum. And we have a question here in the chat box. How do we address the issue related to the previous 2016 presidential elections on the use of direct marketing using Facebook, targeting swing voters in the Philippines, especially that we are near the next presidential election? Father Oji, would you like to comment on that question?
Yeah, it will all come to this. I think one of the ways of approaching that question is really first asking who has the means to buy that data. Because when we're talking about targeted ads, what we're really saying is that the information that you have made available to Facebook will now be used against, I won't say against you, will now be used to customize a set of information that will be targeted at select group, select demographics. No? In other words, that's why one of the things that I said earlier was regarding the business model of Facebook, because with this model, it privileges and reproduces the situation that we see in society, wherein those who have the means, those who have, in a sense, capital, whether in this case financial capital, would be able to use the capital that you generate in order to maximize their own capital. In this case, it may not be financial capital, but it may be political capital. So that's one of the things, Siguro, that we have to take note of. Unless something is done in terms of how we could challenge that model, wherein this data can be, in a sense, could be freely used because you've traded it by using the service, the platform, unless there's something that has to come, unless some regulation comes up to be able to decide in terms of how this data could be used, this will always be something of a problem for us. Now, what Facebook has done was, it talks about they offered a chance for you to manage your data, but this can still be a bit misleading, because again, the whole principle that whatever happens there is always tracked by the algorithm. So even if you're not making it available for others, but it's there, it's always being harvested, it's always being used to curate your experience, it's always being used also by the mere fact that you are connected to other users. So kahit na ikaw, you don't give your information, but yung connection mo to others also play a role. So while you may not be seeing it directly, because that information is not something that you give, that you would like to give, no? Pero the mere fact that you're associated with somebody, no? Kasi nga network siya, there's always the chance that it will still show up in your feed, no? And that's where parang it really is a challenge to sort of and I would imagine it's very difficult. I don't know the technicalities of it. Facebook talks about how they're using neural networks, machine learning to be able to make sure that they get it right, the algorithms get it right. But as we have experienced, and as studies have sort of have been showing, that for example, you just let an account be, parang in just a few days, parang it automatically gravitates towards, parang extremist content, no? So parang, does that mean that, isn't that kumbaga an indication that there might be something wrong in terms of the algorithm? No? Kasi yun nga, parang left to its own devices as one solution, parang clearly parang nag-move towards yung mga QAnon ng mga accounts. No? So in other words, parang it still is a big issue, especially in the upcoming elections. We're saying na part of it is because of what we feed into the algorithm, but part of it is also because of the way the algorithm is designed. No? So parang you're sort of feeding into each other and therefore parang creating monsters out of what you feed into it. No? So yun po, parang it will be, I think it is and it will be a problem unless first Facebook does something about it.
Thank you, Father Oji. Yes, no, that's so true, Father, because I think everyone is on Facebook waiting for things to unravel, especially with the political field that we are trying to hurdle, no, especially in the coming months. So do we have more questions? Let's see in the chat box if there are questions. Okay, so here we have one question. Is it possible to have social media that avoids creating echo chambers and magnifying negative content?
Well, to that question, as you can see, parang the way echo chambers have been created is because the algorithm feeds you parang what you're interested in. So in other words, that situation has been technologically mediated, no? And therefore, it is possible perhaps to create a social media that avoids creating that echo chamber. However, the obstacle that you have towards the creation of that kind of social media is because it will not create the profits for that company. Because social media thrives on virality. It thrives on engagement. It thrives on creating that echo chamber wherein you would like things that resonate with what you think and what you believe in. So, yun. Kaya I'm saying na parang you might work on the app, you might work on the platform, but if the business model rests on the fact that content should be interesting, should be engaging in order for the business to be viable, then you will always have an obstacle. But to that question, parang, is it possible? I think it is possible. If only because the situation that we find ourselves in have been created precisely by algorithms that have amplified these echo chambers and have amplified the negative content on these platforms. Hi, Dr. Stella, nakamute po kayo.
Okay, thank you so much, Father Oji. We have time for one more question. Do we still have more questions? Okay, so I think that is all the time that we have for this afternoon. Thank you so much for your questions and for the presentations from our lead discussant and from our panel of reactors. Definitely the deeper issues that surround the Facebook expose and its enormous impact on our personal and social relationships, I think we have started to uncover in our discussion this afternoon, and it certainly has been very fascinating and eye-opening. As we draw this discussion to a close, may I request the Chair of the Information Technology Department, Director of the Horizon Lab, and Project Coordinator of Access Mindanao, Mr. Raul Vincent W. Lumapas, to give the closing remarks. Let's give him a virtual round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Arsenas, thank you very much. Thank you, Father Oji. Advancing technologies will be both our savior and our doom. This is a quote not from a sci-fi or an apocalyptic movie, but from a children's movie, surprisingly. This is a line from Olaf, the cute snowman from the popular movie Frozen, particularly in Frozen 2. The sad reality of this statement is that this is the dilemma that we are currently facing. Technology, particularly social media, indeed can either be our savior or our doom. Social media played a very positive role in communities and societies, but eventually has been weaponized and explored as a tool in causing social unrest, inequality, and division. Distractive as it may seem as presented, no? People can still redeem the value of social media, even though it's difficult. As discussed by our speaker, Father Oji, and expounded further by our reactors, social media holds immense power to either unite or divide. It is really entirely up to us to decide the path we will choose. Before we will end, we would like to thank Father Joel Tabora of the Society of Jesus, our university president, for gracing us with this event. We would also like to thank our speaker, Father Oji Cabayao, SJ, for enlightening us in today's Pakighinabi topic. We thank as well our panel of reactors, Engineer Alan Cabanlong, Director Alimzar Asong of the Mindanao Cluster 3, and Gwen Vasquez, former EIC of the Ateneos. We would also like to thank Dean Renante Pelapel and Father Ramon Prudencio Toledo. We would all like to thank our host, Dr. Stella Arsenas, for hosting this afternoon's event. This event, again, has been facilitated with the help of the Literature, Language, and Arts Department of the Humanities and Letters Cluster. Lastly, we would like to thank everyone who participated in today's Pakighinabi. To end, I would like to share a quote from the movie Iron Man 2, a line from Tony Stark's father that inspired him in building a solution to his heart reactor problem when it seems that there was no solution anymore. Technology holds infinite possibilities for mankind, and one day rid society of all its ills. Soon, technology will affect the way you live your life every day. We hope that everyone were enlightened with today's Pakighinabi and would be able to facilitate our own fruitful conversations with others on social media and its effects to our lives. Thank you very much. Stay safe, and we wish for everyone's good health in the real world and also in the virtual world. Daghang salamat.
Thank you, Sir Raul. And that finally ends our Pakighinabi conversation series this evening. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us here in the Zoom meeting and also to those who have been watching our YouTube live stream. I'd also like to acknowledge the people behind the scenes from ICOMP and the Horizon Lab. So once again, my name is Stella Marie Arsenas from the Department of Languages, Literature, and Arts, your moderator for the Pakighinabi conversation series, saying my heartfelt thanks for giving us your full attention this afternoon. Before we leave, let us turn our videos on and show our beautiful smiles to the camera for our obligatory end of activity photo op. May I request anyone from the ICOMP or the Horizon Lab to do the honors?
Sir Burns, kayo na lang.
Yeah, page 1, ready. Three, two, one. Page 2. Page 3. Page 2 again. Page 1 again. 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much for joining us today and see you again on our next Pakighinabi. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Father. Father Oji, thank you. Hello, Sir Bong, thank you.
Sir Raul, thank you so much.
Thank
Father
you,
Oji, thank
Salamat
you.
kayo.